Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 113, Home Soil.
Ugly bags of mostly water. We welcome you to Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm John Champion. Each week, we drill down through the top layer of soil to see what is seething just under the surface of Star Trek. And Ken, well done. The transition from computer translator voice to Ken Ray voice. Really well done.
No, you probably thought it was one of the Home Soil aliens doing that. Home Soil, by the way, is the show that we're doing this week. And with a title like that, you know the alien life form is going to win, because I don't care how good your team is, home soil advantage is very hard to overcome. It's very difficult. So yeah, you know, I thought about doing the whole show that way, and then realized after 30 seconds I wanted to kill myself doing it. So I figured why, you know, although it might put podcasting back on the map. All of a sudden, everybody's driving themselves off a cliff because I did this dumb computer voice all the way through. So I think I chose well.
I thought that the way you announced that the Home Soil aliens, I thought it sounded like a new sponsor for the show.
You sound bad,
you know, Home Soil, brought to you by the Home Soil aliens.
Yeah.
It could be,
it's more like a sports team to me, though. The Home Soil aliens versus the Rigel 7.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah, right.
Something along those lines. Hey, I have nothing clever to say to get us into trivia, so let's just jump into trivia. John?
Right on. Well, I've got quick trivia for you today, because I want to get right to the story. Home Soil was written by the combined talents of Carl Gers, Ralph Sanchez, and Robert Sabaroff. The first two probably don't sound familiar, since this was their only Trek writing credit, but Robert Sabaroff wrote the TOS episode, The Immunity Syndrome. How cool is that? And we also have to say welcome back to Corey Allen, who directed Encounter at Farpoint. So, Ken, as you mentioned, the ugly bags of mostly water, a phrase that we have heard in and around Star Trek and sci-fi fandom for a number of years. I didn't realize that it originated with this episode. And it is also the title of a documentary called Earthlings, Ugly Bags of Mostly Water. It came out in 2004 and is actually about specifically Klingon fans, not Klingons who are fans, but people who are fans of Klingons, and centers around the Klingon Language Institute. And of course, we've kind of referenced that, the whole idea that Klingon as a language, which we just got a snippet of in Star Trek The Motion Picture, then became its own very complex language. And Michael Dorn appears in that documentary.
Let me ask a question really quickly. When you say you didn't realize that it originated in this episode, did you mean this episode specifically? I mean, you remembered it was TNG, right?
Yes, yeah. I knew it was from TNG, but it was kind of a surprise to me. Like, oh, look, that's where it comes about.
Like Act 4, right? Act 4 of this episode.
Yeah. And I think maybe I didn't realize that because I had for so long recently kind of combined that phrase in my head with Klingons, maybe
gotcha.
From the documentary. But yeah, here is the origin of that phrase.
No, it totally surprised me when it came up in this episode, because in my head, it was such a memorable line that it happens all the way through the episode. And so when we're all the way up to Act 4 before they say it, and then he pops out with that line, I was like, oh, that's here. Okay.
Right.
Because I really thought we would have been hearing that much. All right. As you were.
Right. So I want to point out two of the guest stars in today's episode. Elizabeth Lindsay played Louisa Kim. Now, she was a Miss Hawaii in 1978. Not a Miss Hawaii. She was the Miss Hawaii in 1978, as if there were just hundreds. This is lousy with Miss Hawaiis.
Well, you know.
She appeared in a handful of TV shows. I found it very interesting that one of her first TV appearances was on Fantasy Island. Of course, a big Star Trek crossover there with Ricardo Montalban. And then one of her last TV appearances was on the remake of Fantasy Island from the late 1990s. Another Star Trek crossover yet to be with Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah, such a shame that show didn't last. And I'm not kidding.
No, I love the concept of that show. I wish it had stuck around.
It was crazy. It was Barry Sonnenfeld, I think. That was
I think you're right.
Was behind it.
Yeah.
And it had something that probably left most of America going, huh? So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, stay tuned for our Fantasy Island podcast.
Coming to you in 2045.
Right. But finally, the guest star that I want to talk about is Walter Gotell as Mandel. Wow. I just, for me to get excited about a guest star, here we go. He played General Gogol in 6 James Bond movies, starting with The Spy Who Loved Me in 1977, and ending with The Living Daylights in 1987. He even appeared as a henchman in From Russia with Love. He was German, not Russian. So even though you think of him as General Gogol, he was actually German. And of course, he has had a long and varied career. But I was very excited to see and recognize him because being the big James Bond fan that I am, I was very excited by that bit of crossover.
In a game between the home soil aliens and the crew of the Next Generation, what passes for my money would be on the Enterprise. They bring a really strong D.
Prologue. The Enterprise stops by the planet Valara 3 to check on the progress of terraforming by a team of Federation scientists. When Picard calls down to the director of the team, Kurt Mandel, he doesn't exactly get the reception he expects. Here's the whole thing in a nutshell. Picard. Hello, Kurt. We just stopped by to say hello. Mandel. We don't want any. Picard. Really? It's just a friendly call. We want to see how you're doing, maybe chat over a meal. Mandel. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Go away. Picard. Great. We're beaming down. Then Deanna Troi pipes up with what should be obvious to anyone, even if they have never heard of emotions. Mandel is hiding something. Act 1. When the away team arrives at the lab on Valara 3, they get a much warmer greeting. Riker, Yar, Data, and LaForge are greeted by Louisa Kim, who then introduces them to Arthur Mallinson, a hydraulic specialist, and Bjorn Benson. Engineering is the name of the game for him. Bjorn is fascinated by Data and realizes he's not one of us. Louisa Kim walks the away team through the basics of terraforming. Her group chooses a suitable planet, then starts by processing or adding water and ultimately microorganisms. Over time, the dead, lifeless planet will be Class M and support life. The important part is that the planet they choose must be lifeless. Come on, didn't anyone see the Wrath of Khan? This planet has a shallow band of very salty water just below the surface and will be perfect for their needs. Just then, the director, Mandel, stops in, apologetic for the rude communication a few minutes ago. He's still not one for friendly banter. He's a busy man with a schedule to keep. He orders Mallinson into the hydraulic chamber to get back to work. Just a moment later, though, Deanna senses trouble, and the crew rush to the room where Mallinson is screaming in pain. Once the doors open, they find the laser drill above him and carnage below. Act 2. Mallinson is in bad shape. They cut all power to the room, and everyone except Data, LaForge, and Bjorn Benson beam up to the Enterprise sickbay. Data notices something weird. He thinks the laser drill acted as if it had will, like it knew what it was doing. Working from this theory, he asks for power to be restored to the room. Everything works perfectly until it doesn't. The laser turns toward Data and begins firing. LaForge can't cut power because the power has already been cut. While Data struggles, LaForge and Benson rush to the room. They can't open the doors. Just as Picard is about to demand an emergency beam out, Data emerges from the room unscathed, now certain that a mind of some sort was in control of the laser drill. Bjorn is really not happy. That laser took him a year to build, and I'm sure cost lots of money. On the Enterprise, Picard and Mandel have a bit of a showdown. Picard is suspending the work of the terraforming team until the mystery can be solved. When Mandel leaves in a huff, Data explains more that he is certain the laser drill was programmed to destroy anyone in the room. The question then becomes, who would do such a thing and why? Mallinson is dead, too severely hurt by the laser, and now Picard asks Data and LaForge to beam back down to the lab on Valara 3 to see if they can piece together any clues about what was the cause. What they do find is most unexpected. It's a tiny pinpoint of light, flashing in patterns which LaForge describes as musical. It's not life as they know it. It's definitely not organic. But Data thinks it could be the reason Mallinson was killed. Act 3. Unsure what it is they found on Valara 3, the possible life form is beamed up to the medical lab for Dr. Crusher to run tests. It's not carbon-based, but it may fit the criteria for life, reproducing, moving, eating, excreting, etc. She'll have to see if it holds up to scrutiny. They've never seen anything like it before, a life form that isn't based on carbon ever since the Horta was removed from the memory banks in the computer. When a loud humming emanates from their sample, the crew gathered around back off. It seems to sense where they are. Magnifying the sample on their monitor, Dr. Crusher asks the computer to make sense out of it. The computer can't. There are patterns, but it should be impossible from this molecular makeup. Disregarding what should be happening, the computer gives an answer to Dr. Crusher. The unknown is alive. Picard confronts Mandel with this new information. Mandel insists that he had no idea and that he would never murder to protect his work. Once he's out of the room, Deanna says he's pretty much obsessed, but that's to be expected. Still, we can't pin the blame on him just yet. Louisa Kem is probably innocent. Just to check, Riker visits her in her quarters. She's actually really torn up about the whole thing, intrigued by the life form, but devastated that her career is in turmoil now. In the medical lab, things are changing. The hum has lowered. The energy being put out by the inorganic life form has subsided a bit. Then before you know it, we welcome into the world a healthy, companion, microscopic, light-emitting, definitely inorganic thing right next to the first one. They try to quarantine the life form, but the beam around its bell jar is reflected. As the crew leave the room, the Enterprise computer translation circuits come online in a garble. Picard makes the call to Riker on the bridge. Their visitor is definitely alive, and it's definitely trying to communicate with them. Act 4. Time to get everything out on the table. Picard again accuses Mandel of knowing full well what was happening on Valara 3, but Mandel still insists that this life was nothing more than light being refracted. Bjorn speaks up that the pattern of light in the sand, which might have been a kind of SOS, were simply ignored because they didn't mean anything to them. He's like, look, knowing me, knowing you, we did not do anything we thought was wrong. We were not trying to cause a Waterloo for some unknown life form. At the time, they simply didn't know better. But Picard has made it clear now that this life form has intelligence. Visual communication comes back from the medical lab, and it looks like the life form has been busy. There are now about 8 of those little buggers where there were only 2. The colony of cells has been dividing and replicating. When engineering calls the bridge, there is a problem. The quarantine they had set up around the medical lab is now starting to fail. On top of that, the Enterprise systems are acting a little haywire, with people getting trapped in turboliths and a couple of people trapped in a restroom. There's an energy fluctuation in their bell jar containing the life form, and then it speaks. Through the ship's universal translator, it addresses the crew who have reassembled on the bridge. It calls the humans ugly bags of mostly water, and then lays out its totally understandable grievances. Those scientists drilled on its home, and now they've got a bone to pick with the Enterprise crew as well. Picard tries the old diplomatic standby, we come in peace. Deanna tries to butter them up with how beautiful they and all life really are. None of it's working. The translation goes offline, and the Enterprise is rocked violently by the life form, which grows in strength the more it reproduces. Act 5. We've not been very good about giving the new alien life form a name. Picard fixes that by dubbing it the Microbrain, but sadly Microbrain isn't talking anymore. It's still chugging along, interfacing with the Enterprise computers, and there's not much anyone else can do about it. At one point, it looks like the energy the microbrain is giving off starts to slow down, and an attempt is made to beam it out of the lab back to Valara 3. That didn't work. Time for the gloves to come off. Picard orders the air evacuated from the lab, but that doesn't work either. Things are serious. The life form now threatens the safety of the Enterprise. Better convene in the conference room. A little deductive reasoning goes a long way. The microbrain is a single-celled organism, but the more cells, the greater the intelligence and power. That saline water just below the planet's surface was actually connecting the brains, and once the terraformers started to siphon away the water, the life forms fought back. They all get it now. The microbrain grows again, this time into a clearly visible crystal about the size of a baseball. There is a breakthrough, though. Data determines that the microbrain is photoelectric, using light for energy. Louisa Chem gets it. When they drilled through the sandy layer into the saline, the water table dropped, thus starving the organisms of the light they needed. With this new information, Picard orders that the light to the medical lab be cut. Since they have no control over it remotely, Riker rushes to the corridor outside the lab. It works. The microbrain is visibly weaker and communicates to Picard. It's dying. Picard says they will end this war. They don't want to fight. The microbrain seems desperate and, without the light, is in no position to negotiate. Picard says they will beam it home to the wet sand of Alara 3. When the microbrain agrees, the lights are brought back up in the medical lab, but Picard is asking just a little too much if the microbrain now trusts the humans. Nah, not really. Come back in 300 years. We'll see how we feel about you then. Picard gets it. Trust has to be earned. And then he makes good on his promise to beam the microbrain back home. Then he does exactly what Captain Kirk should have learned to do nearly a century before: set up the safety cones around Valara 3 before heading away. The end.
All right, I got two things.
Yeah.
First of all, way to blow first contact.
Yeah, ouch.
Yeah. The other one has nothing to do with the episode, but it has to do with this episode about that episode. Mm-hmm. What was up with the ABBA?
What do you mean?
I mean, what was up with the ABBA?
It's, I don't know what you mean, Ken.
What was up with the ABBA, dude? Seriously.
I don't know what you mean, other than just to wrap it up by saying, Fernando Chiquita, gimme, voulez-vous. All right? Moving on.
Why? It will vex me.
It was Bjorn.
Okay. Oh, Bjorn.
And
okay.
if I think of all the Bjorns I know,
yep,
that's the only one.
You know, it's interesting. I totally would have gone assimilating into the collective, because what I think of is Bjorn Borg.
Right.
Yeah. See?
Yeah. Yeah. So that would have been...
Whatever, dude. No, honestly, I couldn't figure it out. So thank you, because it would have driven me crazy.
I didn't have enough Swedish tennis jokes.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Well, no, it still would have been Borg. But anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't know about the Borg yet, though, so never mind. Go ahead, you were saying.
Who are you talking about? Yeah.
Where was I? Way to blow first contact.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And we'd have a short memory, too, because I do recall that the Horta was a silicon life form.
We have, you know what we've done, though? We've stopped name-checking TOS at this point in Next Gen. I mean, in Next Gen, we've stopped doing that. Yeah. So I don't think people would necessarily go, aha. Because, I mean, the other thing is the Horta did look alive, even if it was made of stuff we didn't recognize as being alive. I mean, it did scurry. Mm-hmm. We saw people screaming as it was coming towards them, which is very different than, oh, look at that light.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, but I mean, they are really, they're stymied. They're stumped by the whole idea that anything could be life and not be organic.
Yeah.
And, this is something that here and now in the early 21st century, there are scientists working on that very idea that you could have life existing elsewhere in the universe that is not organic. And it just happens that James Kirk interacted with one 100 years before the Enterprise crew found this.
Yeah, it's a little while from now, though. Hey, I got to give writers of TNG a little bit of credit, by the way. Knocked me off my game this week. Oh. I think I said a couple of weeks ago that any mention of the holodeck in the prologue meant that it was a holodeck episode.
Right, yeah.
Riker mentions the holodeck in the prologue, and that's it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We don't go there, but we know what's on Riker's mind.
That's true.
And not give it up.
That's true. Yeah, no, I mean, and you knew because there was no emphasis on it, but I was just like, wow, didn't I just say like 2 or 3 weeks ago that if they mention it, then it's going to be, and now here they are going, oh, you think so, huh, smart guy?
Right. Right.
Also, they're really forward thinking because to screw me up 2 weeks later, almost 30 years ago, is kind of awesome. Well played, whoever wrote this episode. Well played.
Nice.
I know you already said who wrote it, but I've forgotten. If it's not a pseudonym for DC Fontana, then you know.
Right. They're all. I
thought about interrupting you and making that joke, and
right.
you know who those 3 people are? DC Fontana.
Exactly. Hey, since you were talking about the prologue, that whole scene where Picard is talking to Mandel and Mandel is shutting him down at every turn, it made me think. So you are to assume that Picard is seeing Mandel on that huge display on the front of the bridge. And you are also to assume that Mandel is seeing Picard, or he's seeing the bridge, or he's seeing something with a camera on his end. You know, he's looking at a computer screen or a TV or whatever. And I kept thinking during this whole thing, Deanna keeps leaning over to him and saying, no. Yeah, he's hiding something. And then literally cuts the transmission. Maybe there's still video coming through, maybe not. And I'm thinking Mandel can see this, right?
Well, you know, we don't actually know for sure. Wouldn't it be funny if Picard's send was like the Ferengi send?
Right, just a giant head on a white background.
Exactly. It's like a huge Patrick Stewart face. You can't even see his ears, just like that big, like right in the camera, and so then he wouldn't necessarily see it.
Maybe that's it. But it also shows you how they get very impatient when Mandel doesn't pick up right away, and that kind of goes back to my thing about Angel One. It's like they just expect you to be there at your desk, ready to answer a call from a starship at any time.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. I mean, although in fairness, the terraforming station is fairly small.
It is.
It shouldn't have taken that long to get there, but yeah, you know, he could have been indisposed.
He could have been forming a terra.
Yes, that too.
Yeah. Speaking of those terraformers, when Mallinson, oh man, it's like the New You scene in Logan's Run just gone horribly wrong with that laser firing at him, and he's laying there crumpled on the floor, and they go in. Riker calls up to the Enterprise, and he just basically says, like, I don't think he's going to make it. I'm like, he's right there. He's right there.
Yeah.
How would that make him feel?
Good point about that. Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, Dr. Crusher very nonchalantly delivers the news that he did die. You know? Yes. Just on the bridge, like, he didn't make it. We got to move along.
That was a little. She didn't even seem upset by it.
No,
but I guess he was an ugly bag of mostly detritus.
Well, and Riker pretty much made his fate inevitable. I think
that's true. Maybe she didn't even try.
No,
I heard. I just, I looked. Didn't seem like. I thought it was kind of funny, actually. So the engineer, when they get there, right? The engineer meets them all and meets Data, and he's like, "Whoa, I want to know so much about you." But then Data breaks his stuff, and he's like, "Dude, you broke my drill."
Right.
I'm kind of cooler than a drill, and also more important. And he's just like, He doesn't seem quite as impressed with the robot anymore. I guess that's really what I'm thinking.
And I kept thinking, we could replicate 50 of those lasers on the Enterprise in no time.
Yeah, I was wondering about that when he said, a year's work. I mean, did it really take that long to put together that drill?
Really? Yeah.
Because, we know
you got it from IKEA.
I mean, I was going to say, I can put together a desk. I can put together shelves. I mean, granted, a laser drill is going to be a little bit more difficult, but I'm assuming they're making them someplace. Right. As opposed, did he actually have to grind the, I don't know what goes into a laser, something lasery? Did he have to grind the crystals?
Yeah.
What did you say?
Laser parts.
Laser parts? I thought you said something hearts. I was like, oh man, lasers sound like almost cultish. If there's a heart involved. Ugh.
But about terraformers, here's a problem. They're often obsessive. It frequently goes with their career profile.
Yeah.
Because Deanna is profiling.
Yes.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense though, right? I mean, they're living in like a room. Like
it kind of does, but I mean, I don't know. I thought it was just a little bit uncomfortable. It was like, this is generalized. I mean, if these are the only terraformers ever, and
they can't be the only terraformers ever.
Well, see, exactly.
Right.
You know, so I assume there are a lot of them out there. And they probably come from all walks of life, and they probably have many and varied qualities of personality and interests that they bring to the job. And Deanna's like, no, they're just all obsessive. They're crazy.
Maybe. Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, I would say practical jokers should not go into terraforming.
No,
I would say that somebody who's really outgoing and gregarious should not go into terraforming,
right.
Either because you're going to run out of like people to talk to, or the other 4 people are going to get tired of you.
Yeah.
Just the yes, it is still hot enough for me. Why? Right. Every day for how long now? It'd be terrible. There are 2 things I noticed about the terraforming thing, or 2 questions that I had. Well, one was a notice and one was a question.
Okay.
I think that I noticed that imaging station is amazing. That thing where she's got the globe and she can move it, and then it was just a great sort of like ancillary piece of technology, kind of like that time that we saw the communicator. It means nothing, but it's a great effect, and it's a great little showy piece. The question that I have is, we've got galactic travel now, right? Mm-hmm. We're able to go to all these planets, lots of M-class planets that we've come across. Why are we terraforming? Is it something we should actually be doing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I thought about that, and that's actually a point that maybe ties into something in my notes for the discussion later.
Oh, okay.
But I figured the short answer to that question is that there are Class M planets, but realistically, let's say that, okay, we're discovering all these planets now.
Right.
And hopefully we will discover in the future that some of those truly are Class M planets. They have things like water and trees and an oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere and things that we would need. But realistically, if you have that means that you also have other organisms. And the likelihood that we would get to one of those planets and be killed very quickly by foreign organisms is probably pretty high. So I would think that even if there are a lot of Class M planets out there probably aren't a lot of Class M planets you would want to live on. Maybe some that you could visit, but there might also be quite a long time in between there where you've got to determine absolutely the safety of human presence and intervention there.
All right.
I'm going with that.
That's fine. I was just, I found myself wondering, why.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's just one of those, to see if we can or because we can or something like that, I guess I'm even okay with that. If it is a barren rock, just make sure it actually is a barren rock. And of course, with having to change what our definition of barren would be or change our definition of what life would be.
Right.
Then there's actually no way to know.
Well, you do get into a difficult thing there, which is, we have to find not only the right planet, but it's got to be in the right place. And so you couldn't theoretically just go terraform, Saturn. Right. Because, the makeup of that planet doesn't lend itself to that. And it's so far away from the sun that you probably couldn't sustain it, even if you could introduce enough oxygen or water and physically change the composition of that planet into something that we could actually use and change the gravity. There's so many factors there, but I'll leave that to scientists who are actually trying to figure out how to terraform, I don't know, Mars.
Right.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about engineering. All right. So here's a great scene, a great moment. The unknown engineering person who calls up to the bridge about a problem with the seal that's holding the life form in the lab. And Riker just leaves the bridge, leaves command, and puts Data in charge. And I thought, they're getting this personnel thing all backwards and all wrong. Data or LaForge should have gone down to engineering or should have gone to the lab. Riker, kind of useless at a point like that. By the way, the unknown engineering person is Caroline Barry, never to be seen again on Star Trek. I felt bad because she has like a couple of lines and it's like, oh, this is the engineering person of the week. Yeah. And we'll just know more out of her.
This is one of those times, shouldn't Worf have actually said to Riker as he was on his way out, Sir, you're in command. Like he did to Geordi, right?
Right. Stay on the bridge.
What are you going to
go
do
everywhere?
Yeah.
But she does do something very important in that brief dialogue with Riker. We get to see that cool schematic on the wall, so we get an idea of where the medical lab is in relation to the rest of the ship. Mm-hmm. And she confirms for us there's at least one restroom on the Enterprise, and it belongs to the programmers.
How? What?
She says that there were people trapped in a turbolift.
Okay.
And then she says there are 2 people trapped in a restroom.
Oh.
Yeah.
Totally missed that.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that there would be.
Right. She says one of the restrooms. So actually we know there's at least 2.
Good. Well, there are 4 holodecks we know now, so hopefully there's at least 2 restrooms. Although I guess maybe the holodeck could double, because it can be whatever you want it to be, right?
Very true.
Yeah. That's so terrible.
It is.
Yeah, sorry about that. My bad. Let's go on to something else. I have a question.
Let's do it. Okay.
Microbrain? Really?
Yeah, I know.
Because we've heard that term before.
Well, Picard just learned it. He has to use it somewhere.
I guess so, but I think he's using it incorrectly, unless that's why the aliens get mad at us at the end. Well, you're too rude. Because I know that's an insult, because it was Q, right? Q called Worf that.
He sure did.
Yeah.
And a macro head.
Yeah. So, wow. I can't believe we used that so soon.
Yeah, I know. I did think, the Microbrain character was interesting, because we've seen things kind of like this in Star Trek before. Here was a super advanced intelligence. It can interface with computers. It can even pick the right words in the translator. Like that's kind of the interesting thing. The translator, we assume, has to have a baseline in order to compare languages. This thing, for all we know, doesn't even have a language. It just has patterns and impulses, but it can figure out enough of that. It can control pieces of the Enterprise once it's figured out that. And it has an understanding of abstract concepts like life and death. It says to Picard, "We're dying. Mm-hmm. You're killing us." I thought that was really interesting. But then again, it's just another in the long line of super advanced beings that really want nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Except for maybe way, way in the distant future. I think about that episode of the animated series where they actually say, yeah, come back and whatever. I can't remember, because it was a very vague description of time. It just seemed like it was going to be a long time.
Yeah, didn't the Metrons do that as well in the original series?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's like,
they're like, we're not ready for you.
Yeah. No, it's actually been interesting, because in TOS we've seen some. I'm sorry, in TNG we've seen some, some like the Traveler, right?
Yeah,
it's like, you guys are starting to get interesting, which the Metrons wouldn't think so at all. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily seeing the whole super advanced thing. I mean, yes, it learned how to use the computer, and okay, I'm fine with that. But I'm actually just beginning to wonder if maybe the galaxy isn't just full of standoffish sort of jerks. Because they're like the Harada, right? Come back when you learn to say hello properly, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's their thing, right? If you can't even say hello, I don't want to talk to you. And these things, the microbrains, and I can't believe we're going to stick with calling them that, but the microbrains say, no, you're too arrogant. Yeah. Okay, well, really? Yeah. So I'm not allowed to be here because I'm too arrogant. Okay, let's consider that for just 1 second. I mean, I'm thinking maybe the Federation doesn't even want these aliens in it. If this is the way they're going to be, if this is how every meeting is going to start, we're going to, we're going to go hang out with the Klingons. Seriously, we would rather hang out with the Klingons. I'm just... say hello.
I think I want my nickname for you to be Home Soil. Then I can call you and say things like, "What's up, Home Soil? Do you want to go for coffee?" And then we would.
Ken, what you brought up in the last segment about why do we terraform, that really kind of struck a nerve with me for the idea here in this episode, because it raised a lot of questions. And I thought, okay, can we realistically get to a point where terraforming is viable? Mm-hmm. And scientists are working on that right now, because if we intend to thrive and propagate as a species, we'll probably have to do it in other places than just Earth. But then I thought, well, what do we do then? Does that mean that people who want to live one way move to a terraformed planet and others stay behind? And what happens when those differences evolve over a few generations? Mm-hmm. And you could kind of make that argument about people in a shorter term of history who would choose to uproot like that. They might be very different from those who stay behind. You look at the westward expansion in the U.S., at least romantically, we say it took that rugged individualist to move out and to traverse the country. But it seems like we're almost establishing that in the future, many people like to be either alone, you were kind of joking about it before, or at least away from dense population. Whether it's the colonists, because we're always running into colonists, we have terraformers, even a starship crew. Well, the Enterprise, 1,000 people, that's a lot of people. But they're also on a ship away from everybody else. Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot of getting away from Earth, and there's a whole lot of getting away from other people.
There's less getting away from other people on the Enterprise, or maybe these are just the interesting stories, because we're always going someplace, right? At least on the 1701D. Mm-hmm. It's, we're going to this planet to talk to these people, and there are these people we haven't talked to in 60 years, so we want to see them.
And they still don't want anything to do with us.
Right? Yes, there's a planet made of cardboard that seems to be giving us stink eye, so we're going to go there and find out why they don't want to be our friends. Right. You actually bring up a couple of interesting thoughts. Asimov dealt with sort of the differences in the way planets evolve when they come from Earth. In some of the robot novels, I think. Some of the later robot novels. So that's kind of an interesting thought. At the same time, so they all, although they're all originally from Earth, they don't really have that identity. Conversely, and spoiler alert, I'm about to ruin the end of Martian Chronicles. Okay,
oh, no.
Martian Chronicles was written close to 50 years ago, I think. Mm-hmm. Some of the stories are much older than that even. So if you haven't read it and you don't want to hear it, so at the end of Martian Chronicles, Earth goes to war with itself. There's a nuclear war on Earth. And what's interesting is almost everybody on Mars goes back to Earth because they feel this, they feel this tug. So, I mean, it's interesting what you're talking about. Now, I don't think Martian Chronicles I don't think the people on Mars had been there nearly as long as the planets and the robot novels that Asimov wrote. But it is kind of, it's an interesting, way to, what would happen, further down the road. And I don't know what the answer to that would be. As far as the people on the Enterprise, you actually remind me, you stirred up a lot with just that one little part there, John. You reminded me of Kevin Costner in Dances with Wolves.
Oh, yeah.
With the whole thing where he wants to go work on the frontier. And and the guy says, why do you want to work on the frontier? And he says, I want to see it before it's gone. Yeah. So that's kind of who might be on the Enterprise. It's not necessarily they want to be away from people, but, they want to see before there's an exit sign and a Stuckey's maybe.
Well, what's interesting, though, is that with terraforming, you can keep creating frontiers. And theoretically, you can keep going and sort of carve out this very specific kind of existence that you want to have.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're creating frontiers in that respect, though, are you? It's more like a planned development.
Yeah, well,
right. I mean, you as the terraformer are still doing the frontier thing, but then if you move to a terraformed planet, then you've sort of moved that planned city that Disney built in Disney World. It's like, let's see if a community grows around, the shopping mall and these stores and these houses we built.
Yeah, well, to an extent, yes. But I mean, you are still going to a place where theoretically, when they've done terraforming, it's just, trees, oxygen, and water. And you've got to carve out that life that you want there. There's no just like, well, I'm going to run down to Target because I need, to put up new shelves. That's what people stuck on Earth are still doing.
One assumes, though, that there would be a replicator of some sort, right?
One would hope.
Yeah.
One would hope.
You're not waiting for trees to grow for 50 years so that you can, knock them down so you can build a log cabin at that point.
Well, if you really like roughing it, then you would. Well,
if you really like roughing it, then you'd find one of those Class M planets. It's a little too far from the sun, wouldn't you?
Right. Right. Well, let's think about this. So I want to talk about Mandel's motivation and his character, because I thought, well, let's look at the terraforming thing from a different point of view. What if the idea of terraforming at all is absolutely necessary for the survival of the human race? We make certain assumptions about Star Trek, that Earth is fine, that we don't have war and hunger and famine, that we're fine. Okay, but let's twist that a little bit and assume that certain resources have been used up elsewhere, whether it's on Earth or other planets that we might be living on. And what if the new life form discovered at Valara 3 wasn't intelligent and specifically deadly? Because this thing is deadly.
Yeah.
But what if we were already on a planet and discovered a benign microorganism like an amoeba? And that was it. And I guess what I'm asking is, are there any circumstances that could justify possibly Mandel's actions? In theory, he should have just called it off as soon as he discovered that life form, and even picked up the hint that this was intelligence. And certainly before he put his crew in danger. That was his other big mistake. But it then makes you think, well, what drove him to that point? Was it just purely hubris? And as Deanna would say, his obsessive dedication to his work? Or is there some other way to look at the motivation for him to say, like, well, this is critical. This is absolutely critical for the survival of the human race. It's hard to say that in Star Trek, because in Star Trek, as I said, everything's fine.
Right.
But I did wonder, looked at from a different point of view, could we bend our own rules at some point and say, well, Mandel's got to do what Mandel's got to do because other people's lives are relying on his ability to do his job.
Well, this goes back to so much of what we talked about in the original series.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
No. The answer is supposed to be no. The answer is supposed to be no. Is that the answer today? I doubt it. Is that the answer that a lot of people would actually glom to? I doubt that too. But there's no guarantee that being there is going to kill that amoeba anyway. So, if you say, okay, the fate of the human race hinges on being able to turn this planet into a Class M planet, if we can figure out that it's not going to kill the amoeba, then maybe we can coexist. But if it were actually going to kill it, if it were going to ruin things, see, the what if that you're setting up doesn't work exactly, though, because I think the assumption with the Prime Directive is, look, we're doing this for fun. Or if not for fun, we're doing it for, some reason. But none of it has to do with anybody's survival. Right.
Yeah.
Because the idea is that you can start over, or at least the idea is, well, you can't do this here. Nobody's saying you can't do this, but you can't do this here. If you find out that there's, something here that you're going to be screwing with, you can't do this here. That's a very different thing. But we've been given to understand from both the original series and especially more in the Next Generation. Next Generation talks even more like, boy, can you believe all the dumb stuff we did, huh? Like last week, oh yeah, we had a problem with our ozone layer in the 21st century, but that was a long time ago. Things are good now. Every indication is that things are just, going fantastically.
Right.
So, could you ever justify that? Not in the Star Trek setting, you shouldn't be able to.
No, but see, that's what made me then think about Mandel's motivation. If it is just purely that, where he's chalking it up to his obsessive work ethic, then okay, all right.
I don't know that it's necessarily his obsessive work ethic. Here's the thing. This episode requires people to re-examine what they believe and how certain things are defined, right? In this case, it's what they know life to be. And that's not happening so much on this planet. With the things that they see, it's like, oh, that's weird. Oh, that's odd. But that's not life because it doesn't, fit my definition of life. They have to change their perspective and be willing to redefine something. And so then, he can close his eyes at that point. Well, no, this isn't life because look, it doesn't have any of the markers of life. And I really need to go ahead and get on with my work because my work is, it defines me as who I am. Let's say, to use a sort of a Rikerism.
Right.
So his motivation I mean, it does strike me, honestly, as hubris. It does strike me as his obsessive dedication to work. Now, whether that's just because that's the work he loves to do or because he wants to call the planet Mendel one day. I mean, who knows what his motivation is for that, except that he doesn't want anything to get in his way. And so he's not willing to look beyond that. I mean, he's willing to turn a blind eye, basically, so that he can keep doing what he wants to do.
That's quite interesting because we did touch on this last week. We were talking about in When the Bow Breaks, the Aldeans, and at least the Big Radus turning a blind eye to the reality. Dude, you have to.
Okay.
The reality of their situation, the new information coming in about this is what's happening for real. Therefore, your plan of action is, not only inappropriate, but it's misguided because you have the wrong information. Mandel states over and over again here that he was going on Federation intelligence, but the intelligence is incomplete, and he didn't change his mind when new evidence was presented. But at a certain point, he does.
I give the Aldeans more of a pass. Yeah,
I know.
Oh, please. He only changes his mind because he gets caught. Look, he's hiding something in the beginning. He suspects something. And somehow halfway through the episode, we decide that he does not suspect that this was life because he was hiding something in the beginning. He saw something that he did not tell the, Kim, that he didn't tell Kim about.
Yeah, it was Kim.
I give the Aldeans a pass because the Aldeans were dying.
Yeah.
And they were desperate. And there was new information, you're right, but they're really just presented with that new information while we're there, right? There was nothing that indicated to them anything differently, and their minds don't work in a way that they would have thought differently. Mendel is hiding this. And it's not even a life or death situation. It's just something he wants to do. Maybe it's something he's been tasked with doing. Maybe it's his job and it's going to be a bummer if he doesn't get to do it. Or I don't know what happens to him if he doesn't terraform this thing, but he is choosing to ignore it for no better reason than he's got a job to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, he does. I'll give him this much. He had made up his mind. He was blinded by what he thought was going on. Now, he acted inappropriately. He didn't report it. He let his crew stay in danger. All these things that added up. He was hiding the information.
Right.
But ultimately, in the conference room of the Enterprise, he says, now I don't know. Because they didn't get to the point of trying to figure out, is this thing alive? How do we talk to it? Can we talk to it? Do we just need to pack up and go?
All right. So what was he hiding then?
He was hiding that they had found anything that could even be conceived as life or studied as life. So, I don't think they had gotten to the point where...
I mean, if that's what he's hiding, then he knew that it was a possibility.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I mean, so he's done at that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no justification for what he's doing. I mean, he's hiding stuff that he knows if anybody else saw it could stop his work, and nothing's going to stop his work. So he's not even going to think about it or consider it. He's certainly not going to tell anybody about it. Although he's obviously already thought about it or considered it because he's going to do everything he can to keep anybody else from finding out about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
No, I mean, I will go with you. I mean, again, I think this is this whole fascinating psychological thing here that the guy had his mind made up. He was done and just put his fingers in his ears when new information came in.
Yeah, except it's actually worse than that. I think I had actually said that earlier, that he was just closing his eyes and pretending it wasn't there, but he's really not, because he knows enough to try to keep Picard off the planet. Mm-hmm. He knows enough to try to keep the Enterprise away. And knowing that he knows that they might find something that could stop him should be enough to get him stopped. He doesn't get to stand there on the bridge at the end and go, oh, look, I was trying to create a place for life, but I was about to destroy one. Gee, you think? Is that not why you tried to keep me from coming down to the planet? It was actually an interesting moment, too. This was kind of weird to me. And, I'll just say. So Data, Geordi, and Worf are going over the chemical or elemental makeup of the, little tiny crystalline entities. They're growing right there, right? Yeah. And Worf says, they're talking about this, and they're talking about this, and Worf says, but is it alive? And the computer, which has no predisposition for or against life, right? The computer, who does not have a horse in this race, listens to all of it and says, yes, basically. Yeah,
Right,
so Worf
right.
says, but is it life? And the computer says, yes. And Worf says, I wasn't asking you. Dude,
Right.
what the heck? Are you kidding
Yeah.
me? Okay, so like the one dispassionate thing, two if you count Data, the one dispassionate thing there is like saying, you have presented evidence, and so let me say, without any hint of bias, because I can't have one because I am a computer. Yes, this is life. And Worf's like, I don't want to hear it from you, Mr. Science. I want to hear it from people who are alive. I mean, there's almost like a, and it wasn't even a moment. Like, he said that, and then they cut to another scene. But that's, I want Geordi to turn to him and go, dude, what is up with hating on science? Because seriously,
right.
I mean, dude. I mean, and I want him to say dude 2 more times too in my alternate telling of this story because I was sitting there going, dude.
Ugly. Ugly. Ugly bags of mostly water. Time now to figure out whether home soil is something to dig or something to turn under.
Well, I don't know what the score is at this point. I would say, though, that the home soil aliens are definitely they're definitely up. I would say.
Yeah.
But as the game draws to a close, we do want to ask the questions that we ask on occasions such as these, because we do this occasionally. Time to figure out the messages, morals, and meanings of home soil, and whether or not the whole episode stands the test of time, whether it holds up, whether it bears watching today. Mr. John Champion.
Well, here's what's weak. There are a few little slow parts, and it's a bit cheesy that the alien life form has this computerized voice once it patches into the computer. That you have to just you got to swallow that with a big grain of crystalline entity salt. By the way, I'm terrified now thinking that this thing is related to the crystalline entity.
I did have a question I forgot to bring up earlier. Why is it in sick bay it looks like the crystalline entity, but on the planet it looks like nothing?
Yeah, because you would think that they would keep growing, and the planet would just be full of them.
You would indeed. Yes, go ahead.
Until
I'm sorry.
at such point they break off and go into space and eat things.
Start eating colonists. Absolutely. Yeah. Posing for pictures.
Right.
And eating colonists.
Exactly. But those were the only things that I could really fault in this episode, because there's a lot that's really strong here. It plays exactly into the ideas raised by the original series. There's a real sense of mystery and discovery and danger. There's the opportunity for growth and learning once we decide to do what's right and learn about the alien. There's heavy, heavy shades of Devil in the Dark. I wasn't just poking fun because of the Horta being a silicon entity itself.
Yeah.
And once again, in this one, the humans are the devils. There's a bit of a Frankenstein story here, if you want to go that route, with Mandel insisting that he creates life rather than destroying it. But this is one of the few times so far in our first half of the first season of Next Gen that I really thought about the original series, and not in a negative way like The Naked Now ripping off The Naked Time. This brought back themes and ideas and science and all of this stuff together that really held my attention. And again, big props to Walter Gotell as Kurt Mandel, because he brings a certain kind of gravitas and weight and seriousness to the role.
Yeah.
So there's so much that I liked about this. And yes, I think it holds up, particularly if you look at it the way that we do when we've been looking at the themes and stories of Star Trek. This fits right up there with those themes and stories and messages. What about you, Ken?
Yeah, same. I mean, honestly, the weakest part of the whole thing to me was Miss Hawaii. And she's very pretty and she's very pleasant, but she's not a great actress. Right. But I think I've said a million times, I mean, if that's my complaint, then I'm okay. I mean, it was a well done story. It was a well told episode. I still have the problem of, I think we're letting Mandel off the hook I think he is let off the hook in this episode in ways that he should not be. I mean, he was obviously up to something. He obviously knew that there was something going on, and that ends up sort of being a plot hole for me, that he gets to stand there at the end. You know, I mean, the Binars, for crying out loud, are going to face charges for what they did, and they were trying to save their planet. Mandel was obviously not concerned about the indigenous inhabitants of this planet, whether it be the spotted owl or a tree squirrel or a hyper-intelligent computer that it turns out is living just below the surface. He was not concerned at all about what's going on this planet. That part bothers me a tiny bit, but that's not even whether the episode holds up. That's a plot hole, I would say. For the most part, I would say the episode holds up, yes.
Maybe Mandel does face charges in our rewriting, because we did a lot of rewriting on the previous episode.
I expect it to be stated, though. I mean, as it was for the Binars, you know. I mean, in the end, honestly, when he gets to stand there at the end and feel terrible about what they almost did, well, he's the one who almost did it, you know. And so I kind of wish that had been done differently.
I don't want to be the guy who is trying to get Mandel off the hook. That's not my position on this.
Yeah.
Mandel acted incorrectly and improperly in many, many ways. I do think, though, that there's a certain point where he doesn't have the full picture in his head. And he is putting the blinders on, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, because he doesn't want the full picture. I mean, honestly, he strikes me as somebody who it's deforestation. I mean, he strikes me as people today. I mean, he strikes me as people who are like, oh, well, we don't know what that is. There's no proof that is, you know, climate or, you know, he strikes me as somebody who wants to do something the way he wants to do something. And so he's not going to consider other possibilities. And what he keeps falling back on is, hey, look, you guys were the ones who said. Right. He's down there. He's getting new information. The new information he's getting is geometric patterns showing up in the sand. Right. Yeah. He's getting new information. But what he keeps saying is, you guys check this out and you guys said it was fine. So I'm going to keep doing this until you guys tell me it's not. He's there. Right. Yeah. I mean, now I'm getting more angry about him, honestly. It's a hole in the plot. Either he is being let off the hook, or they forgot halfway through that he was a bad guy in the beginning, because he's a bad guy in the beginning. Yeah. It seems to me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, let's talk about the messages.
All right.
What else did we find here?
Are you asking me, or are you going to tell me?
No, you first.
Well, mine's, I mean, just the whole, you know, be open to new ideas, though maybe more than that. Don't be so bent on doing what it is that you want to do that you ignore any reasons to not do that. I mean, that really is what he boils down to me, is he wanted things to be the way he wanted things to be. And so he is either going to rely on somebody else's information or just turn a blind eye. And that to me is one of the biggest things in here. And of course, you know, be willing to re-examine your own preconceived notions, even if it does involve something like, is that alive?
Right.
It looks dead or not. Right. It looks inert, but maybe it's nerd. I don't know what the proper way to say that is.
Right.
Nerd. Yeah. I mean, basically, it's almost like checking your work as you go in a way, or doing the right thing. I don't know. I mean, is he a hapless bad guy, or is he an evil bad guy? Either way, I would say, I mean, everything that he did, don't do that. I mean, that's kind of the message. It seems to me.
Yeah, he's the worst example, well, one of many bad examples of motivated reasoning. You know, here's the thing that I hold in my head that is what I have to do, and I will do this. And not only will I ignore other evidence, I will twist that evidence to justify what I've already decided to do.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
So then I look at this and I go, okay, well, does this episode have any kind of condemnation of science or a you know, don't fool with Mother Nature kind of message? And I really don't think so. You know, again, the technology is neutral. It happens to be what obsessed and drove Kurt Mandel, and it's what he does with it that is a big, big problem here. But if you were to kind of globally look at those messages, well, the ends do not justify the means. Right. You know, clearly with a character like Mandel. And, you know, I go back to something that you said early on, Ken, and that's that the prime directive still means doing the hard thing, even when the easy thing would be a whole lot more convenient for all involved. It would have been a whole lot more convenient for them to just go like, well, okay, there's this thing here. We don't really understand it. We're not going to bother to figure out if it's alive or not. We'll just keep drilling and keep wiping out what's here because it's convenient. And it's convenient for Mandel to ignore any contrary evidence. And Picard hammers him on the Prime Directive. And well, he should have. Picard has a great line at the end, too, when he is addressing the microbrain. Now that you phrase it, it seems so insulting. And really, they were trying to be kind about it. He says, we will end this war if you end the war. And we've kind of seen that before, again, going back to the original series.
Yeah.
All it takes is the first one to not fight to find a solution.
Yeah.
Now, Picard's got the upper hand. They can turn off the lights. Until such point, though, that this hyper-intelligent crystalline being figures out a way to not let them turn off the lights.
Right.
Because that point could come.
Yeah. It's actually kind of amazing to me that they can't even open the doors sometimes, but they can totally turn off the light.
I know, right.
Yeah.
But that was another nice takeaway for me. And then I would have to say unequivocally that all of these messages hold up quite well, given any context.
Yeah, except for my only problem with it, and the more we think about it, the more trouble I have with it. My only problem with it is the treatment of Mandel. But I mean, it does give you, it gives you a lot to think about without having to make up a lot of stuff. Yeah, because we've had amazing discussions before about things that weren't even close to the episode.
Right,
and this is all presented here for us. So that's it's convenient. It actually saves a little bit of work for us, certainly. If you had some thoughts on this episode, not you, John, you've shared yours.
Okay, I was going to write in.
Yeah, I was going to say, wow, you're almost psychic, though, because you did know that I was going to say if other people had some thoughts on this episode, if they want to join the conversation on this or any other episode. Lots of ways to get in touch with us: Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. Our handle in each of those places, Mission Log Pod. You can call us 323-522-5641. You can email us, missionlog@roddenberry.com. We have a website for our show. It is missionlogpodcast.com. But if that's too much to put for a URL, there are a couple of others that you can check out. Trekmovie.com is currently carrying Mission Log, and we're grateful that they are. And we're on Trek FM, which is online at trek.fm. Remember, any place you get in touch with us, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
All right, Ken. Well, next week there's more to come, and I have to say it's about time. Star Trek, it's coming of age.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages, by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Ken's being too hard on Mandel. He's just a guy who believes on Wednesday what he believed on Monday, and it doesn't matter what happened on Tuesday. That joke was stolen from Stephen Colbert. I may owe him a quarter or something. End transmission.